that you've got the theatre royal, which I've seen and which is truly wonderful.
Oh,
It is
thank you.
outrageous.
You don't expect legends to look tired, not like this. When people saw Mel Brooks stepping outside his quiet home, there was no laughter, no punchline, no familiar spark that had defined nearly a century of comedy. There was only silence, and it was deafening. At 98 years old, Mel Brooks isn't just a man. He's a living archive of Hollywood's golden age, a witness to greatness, loss, and time itself. He outlived his wife, he buried his friends, he survived almost everyone who once stood beside him at the height of comedy history. For decades, he was the man who turned pain into laughter. No matter how dark the world became, Mel Brooks always found a way to make people smile. But that day, the smile was gone. The cameras caught something different. A man who looked drained, as if an entire century had finally collapsed onto his shoulders all at once. No jokes to deflect the weight, no humor to soften the truth. And then the headlines exploded. Hollywood was suddenly shaken by one horrifying story tied to Rob Reiner. Arrests, family devastation, a single violent night that shattered a legacy built over generations. While the media raced to fill the air with speculation, Mel Brooks did something far more unsettling. He stayed silent, and that silence spoke louder than any headline ever could. Because everyone in Hollywood knew one thing. Mel Brooks wasn't just close to Rob Reiner's family. He was family. He wasn't watching this tragedy from a distance. He had been there since the very beginning. He watched Rob grow up, changed his diapers, taught him timing, watched him transform from a restless kid into one of the most respected directors in Hollywood. So when Mel finally agreed to speak, it wasn't for cameras. There were no lights, no publicists, no spin, just a recorder sitting in his living room, and the truth. What followed wasn't a statement. It wasn't damage control. It wasn't a carefully crafted narrative. It was a confession, raw, uncomfortable, and devastating. Mel didn't begin with the crime. He didn't start with the violence or the headlines. He started with guilt. Sitting in his armchair, his hands trembling, not from age, but from something far heavier, Mel Brooks looked up and said something that shattered every version of the story people thought they understood. This wasn't an accident, he said, and it wasn't sudden. According to Mel, what happened wasn't a single night of chaos. It was a collapse that took more than 10 years, a slow, visible unraveling that everyone close enough could see, but no one had the courage to stop. They loved Rob too much to confront him. And that, Mel admitted, is where everything went wrong. Mel Brooks paused for a long time before continuing. When he finally spoke again, his voice was quieter, heavier. He admitted that the most painful part wasn't the violence itself. It was the realization that the warning signs had been there for years. Everyone close to the family saw them, and everyone stayed quiet. Mel said the people who loved Rob knew that Nick Reiner wasn't stable. They watched his behavior grow darker, more unpredictable. They felt the tension building inside that house long before it ever made the news. But no one wanted to be the one to say it out loud. This wasn't about a monster appearing overnight, Mel explained. It was about love going too far, about parents whose compassion slowly transformed into permission, about silence masquerading as kindness. Then Mel took the interviewer back to one moment that had still haunted him, 6 months before everything fell apart. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon. Sunlight poured through the windows of Mel's home, the kind of peaceful setting that usually felt safe, familiar, comfortable. Rob arrived like he always did, but this time something was different. He didn't sit down. He didn't eat. He paced. Mel said Rob looked like a man being hunted inside his own life. That's when Rob admitted that Nick had moved back into the Brentwood house after another failed rehab attempt. But this time, it felt darker, more dangerous. Even though Nick was well into his 30s, everyone still referred to him as the boy. Mel said that single word explained everything. Rob told him Nick had become erratic, delusional, explosive without warning. The tension at home had turned toxic. Arguments erupted over nothing. The air felt charged, like it could ignite at any second. Then Rob said something that made Mel freeze. He had started locking his bedroom door at night. Rob Reiner, a man known for openness, empathy, and family values, barricading himself inside his own home. Mel said that wasn't concern, that was fear. When Mel asked him the question no one else had the courage to ask, why not call the police? Why not get protection? Rob's answer is still echoed in Mel's mind. I promised Michelle I wouldn't give up on him, Rob said. If I kick him out, he ends up on their street. If I keep him here, maybe I can save him. Mel slammed his hand on the armrest when he recalled that moment. He told Rob the truth, straight to his face. You're not saving your son, Mel said. You're protecting danger. But Rob wouldn't hear it. That same stubborn determination that once made him unstoppable in Hollywood had turned inward. The refusal to draw boundaries, Mel believed, became the real breaking point. And then there was the money. People assume wealth makes pain disappear. Mel said that illusion destroyed more than people realize. Over the last 2 years, things didn't just drain Rob and Michelle emotionally. They drained them financially too, not because they were close to being broke, but because the pressure never stopped. Nick's demands grew relentless. He wasn't asking anymore. He was demanding, framing his claims as repayment for his upbringing, twisting his parents' compassion into guilt. He used their values against them. Rob would arrive at Mel's house with tears in his eyes, phone shaking in his hands, scrolling through messages filled with blame, manipulation, and accusation. And yet, the next day, Rob would still give in. Another car, another check, another chance. Mel called it the Hollywood illusion, the belief that if you throw enough love, money, or patience at a problem, you can rewrite the ending, that you can direct real life the way you direct a movie. But life doesn't offer retakes. Mel said he knew exactly where it was heading, long before anyone else admitted it. Mel said the turning point came during the holidays. What should have been a warm, familiar family gathering felt wrong from the moment it began. The room was filled with polite smiles and forced normalcy, but underneath it all, the tension was unbearable. The air felt electric, like it could snap at any second. Mel couldn't stop watching Nick, but more than that, he watched Nick's eyes locked onto Rob. He said it wasn't the look of a son anymore. There was no affection there, no warmth. It was cold, focused, almost territorial. At one point, Rob made one of his usual self-deprecating jokes, the kind that had made people laugh for decades. The room chuckled out of habit. Everyone except Nick. He didn't smile. He didn't blink. That's when Mel knew. Later that night, Mel pulled Rob aside. He grabbed him by the shoulders, his voice shaking, and begged him to act. Robbie, you need to get him out, he said. He doesn't look at you with love. He looks at you with ownership. Mel said he put everything he had left into those words. But Rob heard criticism instead of warning. "You don't understand him like I do," Rob replied. "He's hurting." That was the moment Mel broke down in the interview, not because of anger, but because of recognition. He wasn't just losing a friend. He was watching a man he loved confuse loyalty with surrender. Watching someone who had spent his entire life telling us stories about hope refuse to accept the ending that reality was writing in front of him. Mel said the guilt still eats at him every night. As one of the last living pillars of that golden generation, he feels he failed his people, his family, his legacy, and the thought that haunts him most, he never called the police himself. He said that decision weighs on him like a sentence he can never appeal. Then came the night it all ended. The official timeline reads clean and sterile. Times, locations, reports. But Mel said he knows what really happened in the hours before everything collapsed, because Rob called him. It was late. Mel was already in bed when the phone rang. He almost didn't answer, but something deep inside told him to pick up. Rob's voice was faint, barely above a whisper. This wasn't a conversation. It wasn't a goodbye, but it felt like one. Rob told him Nick was spiraling again, screaming about the will, convinced they were cutting him out, convinced betrayal was happening in his own home. Mel panicked. "Leave," he begged. "Get in the car. Come here now." He said it again and again, but Rob's response stopped him cold. "I can't leave," Rob said. "Michelle is with him. She's trying to calm him down. If I go, he'll take it out on her." Rob stayed, not because he didn't understand the danger, but because he refused to abandon his wife. Mel said that was the last time he ever heard Rob Reiner's voice. The media would later reduce Nick to chaos itself, a headline, a monster, but Mel refused that version. He said you can't understand what happened without understanding the years of resentment that came before it, the unbearable pressure of legacy, the shadow of greatness hanging over someone who wanted applause without the grind. Nick didn't believe he failed on his own. He believed success had been stolen from him. Every closed door became his father's fault. Mel had seen that pattern before in Hollywood, jealousy rotting slowly from the inside. But this time, it went further than anything he'd ever witnessed. From the outside, the Brentwood home looked perfect. Inside, it had been cracking for years, and everyone chose not to see it. Mel's tone changed here, not louder, sharper. He made it clear that this tragedy wasn't created by one family alone. It was shaped, enabled, and prolonged by an entire system that chose comfort over confrontation. There were therapists, consultants, doctors, advisors, people who were paid to guide, to protect, to intervene. Instead, Mel said, they softened every warning sign until it disappeared. They told Rob and Michelle that tough love was outdated, that boundaries were harmful, that confrontation would only make things worse. They wrapped every red flag in polite language and called it compassion. Mel didn't hide his anger. They took his money, he said, just to tell him what he wanted to hear. According to Mel, those professionals minimized danger and normalized dysfunction. They gave destructive behavior clean labels and filed it away like paperwork. They never said the words that needed to be said. This is dangerous. This will end badly. Mel called them accomplices, not because they caused the violence, but because they helped create the silence where it grew. That, he said, is why he's speaking now. Not for the trial, not for public opinion, not for headlines. To him, the courtroom is just paperwork. The real story was written long before anyone stepped inside it. What Mel wants, what he insists on, is that Rob be remembered for who he truly was. Not as a victim, not as a headline, but as a man who kept showing up even when everything inside him was breaking. Rob didn't quit. He stayed. He believed he could still be the father his son needed. The kind of father who doesn't walk away when things turn ugly. The kind who stays in the fire because he still believes love might fix it. Mel said that's what real love looks like. Not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet decision to endure pain in the hope that someone else might heal. And then Mel's voice cracked because that love didn't save his son. It didn't bring healing. It only sealed Nick's fate forever. As the interview neared its end, the room itself seemed to speak. Old movie posters, photographs of laughter and collaboration, faces frozen in moments when everything still felt possible. Mel looked around slowly. He said the hardest part now isn't anger, it's the silence. The phone doesn't ring, the Sunday dinners are gone, the laughter that once filled the room has vanished. And that silence, Mel said, is the loudest sound he's ever known. I'm the last one, he whispered. That sentence, he admitted, will follow him for the rest of his life. He said he'll speak at the private funeral. No jokes, no deflection, just the same truth he told the reporter, raw, unfiltered, and real. Because for a man who built his life turning pain into laughter, there is no comedy left in this story, only truth. Just as the reporter began to pack up, Mel reached out and grabbed his arm. He wasn't finished. His voice dropped lower, urgent, almost desperate. There was one more truth he needed to say out loud. Nick didn't act alone. Mel said there were people around him, friends, who lived off Rob's money, who fed his delusions, who whispered resentment into his ear just to keep the drama alive. Nick may have held the weapon, but others helped sharpen the blade. That single sentence stripped away everything polished and comfortable about the story. This wasn't about one night, it wasn't about one person. It was about a chain of choices, excuses, silences. And now, when the trial begins and cameras zoom in on a man in an orange jumpsuit, Mel says the world shouldn't look away. Don't let it become just another headline. Don't let it fade into background noise. Remember the truth behind it. Remember the years of ignored warnings, the doors left unlocked because locking them felt too cruel, the fear disguised as compassion. Mel said real truth is never clean. It's built from small moments, from hesitations, from the things people see but choose not to name. That's the part no one wants to talk about. Not the explosion, but the slow unraveling that led there. Now the silence has been broken, and its echo isn't fading. Mel said he's done protecting illusions. No more polishing legacies. No more guarding reputations. He's not protecting names anymore. He's protecting truth, and that truth is brutal. Fame protects you from nothing, not from pain, not from betrayal, not even from the people you love most. Rob's films will live forever. But now, because Mel chose honesty over silence, Rob's legacy carries something else too, a warning, a lesson about the limits of love, about the danger of endless forgiveness, about what happens when empathy turns into surrender. This story isn't meant to comfort, Mel said quietly. It's meant to wake people up. As the interview ended, there were no tears, no grand finale. Mel turned back toward the window, staring into the bright California sun. His body looked frail, shaped by nearly a century of laughter and loss, but his eyes were steady. This was not the entertainer the world knew. This was a witness, a man who waited until the end of his life to say the thing everyone else was too afraid to say. Because sometimes the greatest act of love isn't staying silent, it's telling the truth. Even when it hurts, even when it comes too late, even when there's no laughter left to soften it, and that truth, once spoken, doesn't disappear. It lingers.